Okay, welcome everyone. This scrutiny committee is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. I remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Please can those attending switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. Can I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. Could I also remind those in the chambers to use their microphones when they are talking, because otherwise the people online can't hear you. So, fantastic. Thank you very much. So we'll break from the agenda and deal with the minutes of the last meeting afterwards, as we kind of normally do, and invite the presentations around the flood risk management strategy. I think I've got the term right. And I'm pleased to say we've got a cabinet member here today. So if I can invite you first perhaps to do an introduction and then pass over accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously we're presenting today the update of the local flood risk management strategy. I think firstly we must recognise the profound impact of climate change. The reality is our changing climate means we are witnessing an increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather, from torrential downpours to storm surges. These events pose significant challenges to our infrastructure, our economy, and most importantly, the safety of our residents. It is within this context that we find ourselves revisiting and updating our current strategy, and this document is our roadmap to resilience in the face of uncertainty. As we draft this update, we must consider not only the lessons learned from the past, but also projections for the future. Our strategy must be forward-thinking, adaptable and robust, and enough to withstand the challenges ahead. One of the key aspects of this updated strategy is detailing the roles and responsibilities of various stakeholders and risk management authorities. Collaboration and coordination amongst these groups is paramount in our collective effort to mitigate flood risks effectively. By clearly defining these roles, we aim to foster synergy, accountability, and ultimately a better outcome for our community. While the format of the document may be set in guidance, I'm keen to hear the insights, suggestions and critiques from the committee. And following the scrutiny process, we will be initiating a public consultation, and this is an opportunity for us to engage with and solicit feedback from the wider community, ensuring that our strategy is reflective of their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Just to say, Chair, if you're not already, so Stephen Jarrett, Head of Service, has unfortunately got COVID. So he is somewhere, I think, on the screen. So he's here virtually today. He would have been here otherwise. I'm not sure what variant. I think we've run out of Greek letters now, haven't we? So he's a little bit poorly. This is a really technical document, so just bear with us today. And it's going to be key that we get this across to the public as well. So Joe Turner, who's going to lead us through a presentation which explains a bit about this strategy, but also about the wider responsibilities that the council have for flooding. So I'm gonna hand over to her for us to get started, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Hi everyone, good afternoon. I just want to run through the update of the flood risk management strategy. So the first thing is what we need to do. Under the Flood and Water Management Act 2010, Newport's designated as a lead local flood authority, and as the lead local flood authority has statutory duties. One is to prepare a local flood risk management strategy to comply with the national strategy for flood and coastal erosion risk management, to cooperate with other authorities, including sharing data, to investigate all flooding within its area insofar as it considers it necessary or appropriate, to maintain a register of structures and features likely to affect flood risk, and to contribute to sustainable development. And obviously also through consenting powers on ordinary water courses. The Flood and Water Management Act requires all 22 lead local flood authorities in Wales to produce a local strategy. NCC's draft local strategy is an update to the existing local flood risk management strategy and plan, which were previously approved by the Cabinet member, for the Environment, Sustainability and Transport, and published in 2014 and 2016 respectively. Why we need to do this? The Welsh Government's National Strategy for Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management in Wales was published in October 2020 and sets out that over 245 properties across Wales are at risk of flooding from rivers, the sea, surface water, and there's almost 400 properties which also are at risk of coastal erosion. The National Strategy explains that as the climate changes, we can expect those risks to increase with more frequent and severe floods, rising sea levels and faster rates of erosion of the coast. The National Strategy sets out the legislative context to the flood and coastal erosion risk management activities in Wales. Different risk management authorities in Wales are responsible for different sources of flood risk. NCC, as lead local flood authority, is responsible for local flood risk, which is defined as flood risk from surface water, groundwater, and ordinary watercourses. These are generally smaller watercourses. It also has a statutory duty to prepare and regularly update its local flood risk management strategy. The local strategy focuses primarily on these local sources of flood risk, but also acknowledges and considers the other sources of flood risk, including the sea, larger watercourses and flooding from sewers and the associated risk management authorities. And there's just some examples. The flooding at the A48 Pen Howe was recently, that's just after Christmas. The road was actually shut for a period of time due to the flooding. The other example is Orchard Street in St Julian's. That's from December 2020, and there were approximately nearly 70 properties. There were residential and business properties flooded. That was due to the sewer being overwhelmed. Okay. How were we intending to do this? Well, NCC has appointed ARUP to assist with the preparation of the draft local strategy. The Welsh Local Government Association has published a template for this purpose that aims to provide clarity and consistency across the local strategies produced within Wales. It will help streamline the development of local strategies and improve communication with their intended audience, which includes obviously lead local flood authorities, the public, local authorities, elected members and other risk management authorities. NCC's draft is based on this template. We've also undertaken internal consultation with our Civil Contingencies Unit and our Highway Operations Drainage team. We've used historic flood data that NCC holds and also from the other risk management authorities, including Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales, and also the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, and obviously NCC's inquiries and flood records. We've also used ward information and ensured, as far as we can, that we align with other NCC plans, policies and strategies, and we also plan to go out to public consultation. The structure of the document, basically there's an introduction, then the document states how the strategy responds to climate change, next coordination, how the strategy aligns with other strategic plans and the risk management authorities, and also our roles and responsibilities in managing flood risk, our strategic objectives and how they align with the national strategy. We also look at what is the risk of flooding in our area and an explanation of how flood risk is assessed. Then there's funding and prioritisation, our flood measures and actions, environmental assessments and how we intend to monitor progress going forward. Risk management authority, Under the Flood Risk Management Act 2010, each risk management authority is required to fulfil a number of statutory duties. Across Wales, the RMAs include Welsh Water, the 22 local authorities, NRW and Welsh Government. NCC as lead local flood authority has the responsibility of developing, maintaining and managing local flood risk arising from surface water runoff, ordinary watercourses, local authority regulated reservoirs and groundwater. Welsh Water is responsible for sewer flooding and flooding from burst water mains. Natural Resources Wales is responsible for managing flood risk from main rivers and the sea. The Internal Drainage District, IDD, is the responsibility of NRW, and that's Caldicot and Wentlug, for managing water levels in those low-lying areas. The national strategy, published by Welsh Government in October 2020, sets out how Welsh Government intends to manage the risks from flooding and coastal erosion across Wales. It sets objectives and measures for all partners to work towards over the life of the document, which will cover a 10-year period unless significant policy updates are required prior to 2030. There are also other stakeholders with responsibilities in relation to flood prevention and response. There's South Wales Fire and Rescue, riparian landowners, property owners, Public Health Wales, neighbouring lead local flood authorities, the National Flood Forum, Network Rail, Gwent Local Resilience Forum, to name but a few. What are NCC's responsibilities? Well, Newport's responsible for managing flood risk arising from small water courses, pluvial, groundwater and ordinary water courses. The ordinary water courses are generally the smaller water courses. In accordance with the Highways Act 1980, Newport City Council as the Highway Authority have a duty to provide, manage and maintain highway drainage. The statutory duties include the routine and reactive inspection and cleansing of the highway drainage. This also includes the routine and reactive inspection and cleansing of gullies and some minor works to block gullies where it's required. Newport's also responsible for the reactive inspection of culverts where there are issues regarding capacity, and also the routine and reactive inspection and cleansing and maintenance of grids and screens, included at critical locations, which we call hotspots, preceding and following any heavy rainfall. Newport City Council is also responsible for reactive inspection and maintenance of surface water outfalls, and for both routine and reactive inspection and maintenance of our surface water pumping stations. There's liaison with riparian landowners to also ensure that they're fulfilling their responsibilities, and the SAB, which is the SUDS approving body, requires all new developments where the construction is greater than 100 square metres to have sustainable drainage systems for managing surface water. In the event of a flood, Newport as lead local flood authority will investigate to the extent that it considers necessary or appropriate. It will determine which risk management authorities have relevant flood risk management functions and whether the RMA is exercised or is proposing to exercise its functions in response to the flooding event. What NCC is not responsible for, Newport's not responsible for flooding from main rivers. This is the responsibility of Natural Resources Wales. Coastal flooding is also the responsibility of Natural Resources Wales. Flooding from sewers, this occurs when the capacity of a sewer system is exceeded and is the responsibility of the Water and Sewage Company, which for Newport is Dyrkham and Welsh Water. We're also not responsible for flooding from or caused by watercourses on private land. This is the responsibility of riparian landowners. Anyone who owns land or property which contains or is next to a river, stream or ditch or a culvert across their land is a riparian landowner. How do we fund NCC's flood measure and actions? Our drainage operations annual revenue budget is £556,000. This covers routine and reactive gully cleansing, green maintenance and minor ad hoc reactive drainage works. We also apply for Welsh Government flood revenue grant funding. This is £225,000. This is available to cover revenue-based activities such as planned CCTV surveys or investigations, small-scale asset maintenance, inspection and recording. This also covers the annual maintenance of our flood asset database and associated software costs, staff training and planned clearance of flood assets and water courses. There's also a Welsh Government small-scale works grant that's available. This covers small-scale capital schemes up to the value of £200,000. This includes minor works such as relining culverts, improving trash screens and headwalls, restoring drainage systems, new drainage and flood defence infrastructure works, obviously on a minor basis for the flood defence infrastructure. The Welsh Government Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Capital Grant Funding. This covers overall capital scheme costs that are anticipated to be less than £750,000, in which case a business justification case is required to be submitted prior to a full detailed design and full business case. That's submitted to Welsh Government. For schemes likely to be in excess of this, of the 750,000, an outline business case is required to be submitted prior to a detailed design and full business case. Timescales for the strategy. The strategy is due to be published by the end of March 2024. We're obviously going to overshoot that slightly. Obviously, we've got the presentation to Scrutiny Committee today, and following this, we're going to public consultation for an 8-week period. Following this, there'll be presentation to Cabinet, and then hopefully Cabinet sign off and approval of the final version of the document. How we intend to consult. We're going to an 8-week public consultation. There'll be publication of the draft and a link to a questionnaire on Newport's website, and we'll also send links out to all listed consultees and risk management authorities. And we're also looking to have hard copies of the document and questionnaire available for viewing at the Civic Centre and libraries for those who are unable to access the internet. Who do we intend to consult? We intend to consult NCC colleagues and elected members, the risk management authorities, that's Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales and the IDD as part of National Resources Wales, community councils, community groups, and there's some at Lighthouse Park, Llun Civic Centre and Civic Society, sorry. I believe one in Rogerstone. There's other local flood groups and other lead local flood authorities such as Caerphilly County Borough Council, Cardiff County Council, Monmouthshire, Rhondda and Taff and Torfaen in the South East Wales area. We're also looking to consult with the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, Gwent Local Resilience Forum, Gwent Police, Network Rail, the Welsh Local Government Association, Welsh Government, the National Flood Forum and the public. Risks. The risks to the plan are that planned actions within the strategy, if they can't be delivered over the next 5 years, any mitigation actions planned operationally within the strategy need to be realistic and achievable within current budgetary constraints, which obviously we've looked to make this document realistic and within budget. Any cuts to current levels of Welsh Government grant funding, that's both capital and revenue, would be a risk to the plan, as NCC is reliant on the flood and coastal erosion risk management capital and revenue grant funding to deliver both small and larger scale schemes to alleviate and mitigate flood risk. Also a risk is the increase in frequency of storm and flooding events in line with climate change, and obviously the failure of any flood assets. And the other risk also is if there's any change in Welsh Government policy, because that would mean we'd have to amend the plan or the strategy, sorry. So I've just got some examples of what has been achieved since the publication of the first plan and strategy. The one big scheme ongoing at the moment is at Stevenson Street, the flood alleviation scheme there. That's actually on behalf of NRW, but obviously Newport's working in partnership with them to deliver the scheme. The existing 1,350 metre flood bund along the River Usk between Stevenson Street and Corporation Road is currently being replaced. And it's a Welsh Government funded scheme. The works include raising part of the existing earth embankment, and in other areas new flood walls are being constructed to raise the defence to the required level. A new floodgate is being installed for Corporation Road, along with a new section of highway to improve access to the industrial estate that's there when the floodgate is closed, and obviously if a flood warning is issued. And this £21 million scheme will increase flood protection to a 1 in 200 year flood event, and that's a standard in line with the 7 estuary flood risk management strategy. And it's estimated that as a result of this scheme, over 1,100 homes and 1,000 businesses will benefit from reduced flood risk as a result of this scheme. We've also, on more minor works that we've completed in-house, one such scheme is the Colston Place tidal flat replacement. This was a scheme completed in July 2022 at a cost of £25,000 as part of the Welsh Government funded small scale grant scheme that was for the financial year 2022-23. And this scheme's reduced the risk of flooding to 30 residential properties on the adjacent highway. And there's just an example there to the left of obviously the flat valve prior to being refurbished and reinstalled, and on the right, obviously, there's the finished scheme. So thanks very much for your time this afternoon. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Joanne.
I was just going to say, Chair, obviously there's quite a lot of technical information in there, but I mean, yeah, so welcome feedback from the committee. I think one of the big challenges on something so technical as this is how do we consult with the public? Obviously, Joe's listed a number of agencies, statutory agencies who are involved in this sort of stuff. So consultation with them will be somewhat easier because it's their field in which they operate in. But, you know, getting across to the public and the members is a bit of a challenge with this one.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, we, you know, pre-meet, it's one of the areas we picked up really around sort of what does consultation look like and how do we sort of make it meaningful. So hopefully members will have some feedback on that. There's some specific sort of questions which members have got around certain areas, and there's also probably some clarification on understanding of some of the things which may have come from your presentation which weren't in the report, but I'll sort of throw it open to members to sort of ask questions, and we can have a bit of a discussion as we go along, if that's okay by everybody. Just a procedural point, apologies, I didn't ask for declarations of interest before the report, but before your presentation, which doesn't matter. We can pick it up now and you can do it any time. Are there any declarations of interest from members on this item?
Sorry, no, I got a question.
That's okay. I'll come to the question in a sec.
Thank you, Chair.
It may be that you raise specifics that are in your ward, and they might need a declaration of interest. And that's why I was asking. I was thinking I didn't ask because initially I thought it might not be relevant, but it may be. So you just may want to declare them as you go along. Thanks.
Yes, regarding you know, if we mentioning things about our wards, you know, declaring interest of Graig Ward.
Same here, Chair. I'm obviously the PIL member, as you know, but nothing in particular, nothing specific in terms of a conflict of interest.
Thanks. I've got a declaration of interest which will come up later because Andrew will know I've met with him on a particular issue in my ward in the Thompson Avenue Green, which may come up in conversation later. So just declare an interest in that just in case.
I might also have one, Chair, sorry. In my ward in England.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Linton. I think we can assume everybody will have an interest in their own ward. It's whether there are any sort of specific cases that might come up. For example, I think, Jan, you mentioned in the pre-meet that there was something in your particular street which you might sort of declare an interest when that comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks all.
Do you want to mention that now, Chair?
Yeah, you can declare it now or at the time. Yeah.
But the first thing first, in the consultation part, you haven't mentioned local drain firms. My son's a drain engineer and he works for a local firm. I would have thought obvious to get consultation from these local firms. Was it ever thought of? No.
We can certainly extend that and put them on the invite list. I don't think that's a.
Well, yeah, it's available for public consultations if they want it, but we wouldn't specifically normally send anything out to businesses as such.
Yeah, in terms of the statutory consultees, there are more people with legal responsibilities for it. Obviously, in terms of companies that provide service, they're providing it to someone with a legal responsibility. But you know, we can show that's on the distribution list. That's fine.
Can I go on to the report now, Chair?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. In the report, it mentioned the different areas. Sorry, I was trying to get my minutes back up. Then it's gone. Mentioned the different areas, and where it mentioned Bettis, the areas that's supposed to be for flooding. And I happen to live in this one street, and I've lived there for over 50 years, and I have never had any flooding in Meon Close whatsoever. You know, it's just a clarification.
Maybe it happens at night. I don't know. Do we know?
Hopefully not.
We'll probably can pick that up on the database to show
And
what that is, because the information is collated. You'll come from multiple sources and stuff, so we can pick up exactly what that is and feed that back to you if you want.
Okay, just wondered where the information came from. So. Because we're nowhere near the Malpas Brook, and I don't believe Malpas Brook have ever flooded either. That runs through Bettis.
Yeah, but the potential is there because it's a water course,
Yeah.
and we
Okay.
work on flood mapping and previous flood events. So yeah, that's where we get our data from. But happy to.
So yeah, for some of this is risk that may not yet be materialised, Joe, is that right? So we're talking about if water levels get high, you may have a 1 in 100 year or
Course,
70 years, and may not have materialised recently, but that risk could still be there if the maintenance isn't carried out. And so there's lots of flood defences and moving of barriers and things that go on in the night that people perhaps don't even see that prevents something or moves water from one place to another. It could be that, but we'll find out the specifics on
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Councillor Reeks.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just pick up on the go back to the public consultation? I moved away from it, Jan. You mentioned on there about going through it just seemed a little bit sparse in how you're actually going to get it out to the public. It just seemed to mention council website and copies in the civic centre and the library and nothing more than that. Is that just suggested, or have you got a more sort of more plans, for example, for social media or going out in conjunction with the Argus? Can you just expand on how you plan to take it to market?
We're definitely looking to put things on social media and also Newport Matters to put something in there. So it goes out to the public and they're aware of the link. Like I say, we'll be sending the links out to all, I know it's not the public, but local authorities, risk management authorities, colleagues within Newport City Council, things like the local resilience forum. So we're trying to, get the message out there.
So I think it's in terms of the suites of normal promotion, it won't just include the website, then it'll include social media and the like. But if there's specifics that members want to recommend in addition, or if you think that needs beefing up, that's a comment that I think we can receive and look at. That's part of what we hear, isn't it? So yeah.
Just feel as well. You also picked up on community groups, going out by community groups, and I think you mentioned Cully and Lodgestone, and I can't think of the third one, but obviously, was it just those community groups, or you can look at other community groups? Because it take sort of England or Pill, where they've had flooding, for example, you're going to go to those community groups as well.
Well, we've got a list of community groups. So one of my colleagues has that they've been given access to a list. But obviously, if you've got any other community groups you're aware of that we may not have details for, obviously we welcome those details.
Just picking up, obviously, because it's only the 3 that was mentioned. I just wonder whether you're expanding or they were just examples then.
I think so. So I think those groups are specific flood groups that are arranged in the area. They are examples. So yeah, probably. I think it's probably me actually pushing a bit less detail in here because it gets overwhelming. But if there are specific groups that you worry we may miss out in your area, flood risk groups or flood people on this, then let us know. We can make sure that they're involved. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Reeks. I think just as ward members, I think we've got a responsibility to also email on our community groups and different things to say that there's a flood risk, a consultation, and that's how we get the public involved, really. So the more we can push it, the better.
Yeah, it works on social media.
Yeah,
when we put it like that.
There'll be a link, and it'll go through the same way.
Particularly on a topic like this, which can sound quite dry. Well, pardon the pun. Unless you dig into it, but it's an important one. We really welcome member support on that.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point. On the sort of dryness of pun, might steal of pun. So perhaps we can pick that up in terms of the questions and stuff. We've got sort of quite a few people waiting to come in. Councillor Reynolds was next, and then Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Chair. Before I ask the questions on the report itself, just got a quick query about NCC appointing Arab to actually author it in the first place. Just curious, really, whether they were chosen, well, why they were chosen, really, why particularly Arab? Is it a recommendation? Does it come down from Welsh Government? Have they got a track record in producing these sorts of reports?
Arab did the previous plan and strategy, so they were aware of what was previously done. And obviously, they're also responsible for writing the Welsh Local Government Association template. So we've worked with them in the past successfully. So yeah, they were employed to update the strategy.
Yeah,
or assist.
It's just so there's no, as I understand it, no requirement to use them. But in terms of these sort of cyclical strategies, then the general consultancy firms tend to work on it because we don't keep someone employed just to write strategy every 5 years. my understanding is Arab's occupies this space quite a lot, so it does the central stuff, but then it also does multiple strategies. I don't know how this pans out, but it in theory should be cheaper, because although actually within these strategies they're quite localized, there's a lot of repetition, a lot of understanding of the way these maps work and the like, and collating that information. So it won't be just Newports they've done, it'll be others as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul. And that's why I was asking, really, because I assumed that they would be involved in other areas, and hopefully some of our neighbouring areas as well, Torfaen, Caerphilly, Monmouthshire. So they've got that overall knowledge, if you like, of the whole area, not just specifically Newport, because obviously a lot of what happens, floods and water is no respect of boundaries, is it? So.
Indeed, the local knowledge will feed in from the data that we gather as well to some extent. But yeah, I'm aware of a couple of neighbouring authorities. Like I said, it's not compulsory, and I'm not sure that everyone is, but they seem to be the main players in that area from what I've observed.
Right. Okay. Thanks. The question I just quickly wanted to ask as well on the report itself. You mentioned various partners that we obviously work alongside. You mentioned Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Government, etc. I'm just wondering, are they the main players, obviously? Are there any other organisations that we need to be aware of as partners? And have you had any particular challenges in working with these partners in terms of maybe conflicting priorities, if you like? So maybe Welsh Government priorities not quite aligning with ours, or Natural Resources Wales or Welsh Water as a business having slightly different priorities. Have there been any challenges of that sort of nature?
I was thinking about the flooding with Welsh Water at Margaret Avenue, St Julian's, that happened in December 2020. Welsh Water at the time obviously were aware a number of residential properties had flooded, and said that actually that area wasn't a priority to them as an overall, I guess, risk management authority for them to prioritise. But what they did do, or what they have done since, is install emergency pumps in that area. So hopefully that should never happen again. But obviously I guess the sewers system as such is still, well, it's kind of Victorian parts of it and really old, but so that it's not a priority for Welsh Water to update. But like I say, they have put in pumps so that if that situation ever arises again and flooding, starts to happen, and they can operate those pumps, I believe they discharge into the river. So yeah.
I think it's probably worth adding on a general. It's a complex area, and you're working with lots of different people, and often at short notice. So hikes, and he's trying to work out who's responsible, who's doing what. So that you're right, Councillor. That can be a challenge, and also we've got to understand that the likes of NRW, Welsh Water, they're operating on a national scale. They don't have enough resources to sort out flooding for everywhere. They've all resources in the world wouldn't be able to do that. So there has to be a degree of prioritisation. Sometimes that may frustrate us locally, but I think obviously try to work together as best we can. And to the members of the public, it's just flooding, isn't it? But it's different people's responsibility. In some ways, the coordination and the lobbying of that is what the local lead local flood risk authority is here to do. But you're right, it can be very challenging.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, Joe mentioned just very quickly, you did mention, Joe, about the sewers, and that was exactly the point I was going to make, to be honest, was as far as the public are concerned, they don't really care whether the flooding comes from the river, from a water course, or out of the drains, and whether it's sewage responsible or an overflowing river. All they're interested in is they've been flooded, and that's where that coordination needs to come in, isn't it? So if it's Welsh Water that are responsible for the sewers, and we're saying we don't have responsibility for that, then it really does need to be very, very close working, doesn't it, to make sure that these things are mitigated and coordinated.
Of course,
thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. John, just down that relationship route, and a good example of where the relationship broke down, I think, not necessarily with Newport, but was in 2019 with Natural Resources Wales and Rhondda and Taff Council, which resulted in some catastrophic flooding because of something that had been done at the culverts. And it was up to Rhondda and Taff and the leader then to come out and a strong arm against Natural Resources Wales, I know is still going down that route. So what we can act as the council is that conduit and, you know, trying to form those relationships. You're quite right, John, we have to have those relationships there, because it's the public that are not going to go to Natural Resources Wales or Welsh Water. They're going to come to us. We're going to be the one that will shoulder that responsibility. So we have to act, you know, strong arm as much as we can in making sure that, you know, the responsibility is taken by those third parties. I think, you know, as said, unfortunately for those people in the Rhondda in 2019, it was devastating, and, you know, it shows when relationships break down what can really go wrong.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Thomas. Don't forget your mic.
Beg your pardon, a couple of points, but to return to the consultation first. You know, we obviously discussed this before the meeting started, and this is a sizable document, which, you know, it's comparatively easy reading through the beginning bit. It's the other following bits that take the concentration and the time to plough through as well. But we were hoping, or we do hope, that there's going to be some sort of précis of this released with the consultation document. You know, I think, you know, we'll really turn our residents off if we ask them to read the whole lot. And you mentioned, you know, you mentioned yourself, you know, the technical detail that's in this. So, you know, it would have been really nice to sort of try and for us to hear this afternoon how you were planning on précising it. You know, what would be your key priority areas so that you can do the elevator sell, if you like, to the residents here and get it across how vital it is, you know, to all our health and well-being, even if they don't realise it. You know, how are we going to communicate that to residents in the area to encourage them to actually take an interest in this? It is, you know, we know it's difficult to motivate people in a lot of things. Do you want to take that, Paul?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, councillor. And I think it's one of the challenges of the team that I've laid as well is you know, this is rushed because we're trying to meet the March deadline. We won't quite meet it, but you know, virtually no council will meet it, so you know, it'll be a little bit late. But we do need to make sure that it's meaningful, rather than just hitting the deadline.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, we'll take that away. And the challenge is to almost do a sort of an easy done down version, but an easy explainer version. I think that the corollary of that is one of the information we want back from people is, have we picked up everything in your area? Obviously that's quite a long list in itself, so it's a bit of, yeah, it's a challenge, but that's something we've got to work on. We are working on it, and you know, as we develop that, we'll feed that into the committee. I know we've been short on trying to hit all the timescales. Not everything's perfectly aligned, but maybe we'll do that in order to ease some of the concern as well.
Yeah, thank you. And there's something else. We discussed Arup producing this, and you mentioned they produced other ones as well, and they produced them across different areas. It does concern me really, because of perhaps some of the, you know, a couple of noticed things which perhaps weren't as, you know, we've lived in our areas for many years and we didn't realise that they picked up, for example, Jan's area. When she's not being aware of any flooding, regardless of whether they're working behind the scenes. You know, it's never been, residents in that area had never been notified even that they were at flood risk. So it is a bit hard to imagine somebody's going to, you know, embark on a really expensive flood alleviation scheme when nobody in the area knew they were at risk. But, you know, so what I would like to know really is, I mean, I realise this is extra work, but just to test the accuracy, the relevance of what they're producing in these reports, can we have some sort of report on where the update? Actually, I'd like to know what has changed since the last time they did one. And you know, and I mean that goes, you know, it sounds if their brief is pretty wide if they're dealing with doing similar things on a very wide area. I'm just concerned if you're doing these every year, there's maybe a bit of a temptation to just reproduce the whole thing with a few changes in.
So it's every 5 years, but it's a bit of a lag because they've changed it. They've merged two old historic documents. So I think it was 2012-14 when the old versions of these were last come through the council. In terms of some of the stuff as you mentioned,
so
yeah,
we've actually had a bigger gap this time.
We've had a bigger
every
gap.
5 years, so we've actually gone 9 years now. No,
no,
not 9 years.
so this what makes up this report was previously 2 different reports. It was changed slightly by the Act,
Right.
and then the reporting cycle for the national strategy and then our local strategy was all delayed a little bit by COVID as well. So it's a longer gap than it would be normally.
Right.
But the process, I understand it going forward, is that these will be every 5 years. Just in terms of, you're right, not everything in there will be picked up and made flood investment happening. In fact, this is around prioritising that. However, what we need to be of is when there is investment in reducing flooding in one area, what is the knock-on impact of that? Because you may have something that's low risk currently. They try and rectify something that is a big problem in one area, only to push it further on, because particularly that's just how
This is
works,
systems thinking, isn't it? And they ought to be experts on this.
So that's why perhaps some of the lower level stuff that you won't be familiar with, or just for theoretical risk, will be in there, because it's important to capture that as well. So when they're doing their little models and things and trying to work out what happens, they understand all those risks and how they interact.
Do you know what I found? It's important. I wish they'd captured, but I actually couldn't. I couldn't clearly see this. Is actually, this is a strategic document, isn't it, as well as being an operational one. And I would have liked to have seen that they had taken into account sort of what the long-term possibilities are that would improve the situation further. I mean, as I said to my colleagues here, I've been banging on about this thing about permeable membranes, the surfaces for drives, for example, for areas of roads when we can do this. And I'm just not seeing this reflected in the big thinkers, with the proposals that are made. It seems to me that this is a report of, what we're doing, what is being done now through a range of partners. But actually, I want, it's not, we all accept it is not good enough at the moment, that things need to move forward. So I want to see, even if it's things which are never bought in, I would like to see what people are thinking about proposing for the future. And then we can see in the next report, why it was thrown out or where it was bought in.
We have a SUDS approving body. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, we have a SUDS approving body. Within Newport that was set up in 2019. They were set up across Wales. So any new developments over 100 square metres, where there's drainage implications, they have to put in an application and consider sustainable drainage. So we are capturing that as we go along. Obviously, sustainable drainage is being considered. So
I think the point you make is good, and it's a strategic document, but it's a funny strategic document because in effect it sits below the national one and then these river basin piece, and in some ways it is quite operational looking, even though it's the overarching
I'd
operation.
be quite prepared to put this, feed this into the national document as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So some of those that you picked up are picked up on more national strategy, and as Joe mentioned, the example with, and you're quite right about permeable paving, but also people covering over their back gardens is causing significant problems with highway drainage. Yeah. And so the change in legislation, which again stems from the same act actually, but it's taken since 2010 to 2019 to follow through, is around the SAB approval function. So now anything that comes to planning bigger than a certain amount, anything sizable, the council can block and will block if it doesn't have a beneficial impact on drainage. It can ensure that there's enough permeability. It can ensure there's enough attenuation. That doesn't solve the historic problems, and we don't have powers to stop people covering over their gardens. Well,
I think that's exactly the sort of thing I want to see proposed.
Yeah,
those powers are introduced.
But in terms of the structure of how the whole flood coastal erosion management, that sits at a slightly different level in there.
I think we in some ways we're talking about different things here, aren't we? Because there are things that we can do something about, but obviously the way the tides come in and out, that's another different challenge to be thought of in a different way. Yeah. I mean, but I would like to know that fresh ideas were coming. We weren't just sort of being reactive to what we've got now, or just checking up whether a certain scheme works or not. I mean, clearly, Newport is very special. It's obviously special to all of us who've been elected to represent its citizens, but it's special anyway. It's provable. We are the fastest growing area of Wales. We've produced all of this housing to meet, to meet other people's requirements, demands and recommendations. And so we have, we've got to be so careful here that we aren't actually flooding ourselves because we haven't planned that delivery of new housing thoroughly enough. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Councillor Linton was next, and then Councillor Harris, sorry. And then Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Chair. You may have slightly touched on what I was going to say. I'd like to know, you mentioned about all the statutory bodies that are involved in managing floods and the like. What are the responsibilities of these RSLs now that have taken over the land and have got reins on the back of them, and where the trees are falling down and there's fly tipping in there? What are their responsibilities delegated to them to make sure that they're cleaned on a regular basis? Because it seems to me that myself and my residents seem to be reporting a lot of this and preempting them to do it rather than the other way around.
So presumably in that situation, the RSL itself owns the housing, and therefore it will be riparian owner for most of those, if they're sort of ordinary water courses, I think. So in terms of how that interacts with the council does have some enforcement powers. It doesn't take them lightly, so they can't. If you feel that the RSLs themselves aren't addressing that issue, you can report it to the council, and we take gradual enforcement action. The nuclear button is for the council to sort out itself and then recharge the owner, which in that case would be the RSL. We'd be reluctant to do that, but yeah, feel free to notify the team. I mean, Daniel does deal with that sort of issue, quite frequently, but it is a challenge, isn't it?
So they are delegated to look after that reno on their land. Then
Yeah,
they are.
They are. In that instance, they'll be classed as riparian owner, which Welcome literally just issued some revised guidance on that recently, so we can pass that to you if it helps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Harris.
Yes, my questions are more on the operational aspect of the report. Where it said that further action of NCC was about collapsed drains, or collapsed, what to say, proposed, yeah, it's the NCC actions across the ward, including repairing collapsed pipework. I'm just wondering, is there a timescale for repairing collapsed pipework? And also, there was flooding in Ruderian a couple of weeks ago, and the council came out and Welsh Water came out and cleared their pipes and everything. And I noticed on here that Graig is every 2 years. Does that start the clock again for another 2 years before they're cleaned again, or do we have to wait for another flood?
And Andrew can come in on the technical aspects of me.
Yeah, in terms of the gully schedules, we reviewed them based on historical data.
Yeah.
So in terms of the Graig area, we see that as low priority, but we do attend reactive maintenance. So if we're aware of a problem, we will attend.
Yeah, well, there was actual flooding, and you came and did the drains. So if it's another 2 year cycle, you think it'd be done more frequently than 2 years if there's already been flooding there?
So I think in terms of that, that is reviewed, and whether it's in terms of gullies in particular, sometimes they can get blocked for very specific reasons, usually adjacent landowners not maintaining something, and so the action may be more to do with that rather than clean it so often. We also have seasonal issues where obviously just after November suddenly all the gullies are blocked, but that's to do with leaves falling off trees and we can't catch them all. So I suppose it depends the root cause of that. Usually after a call out, then they'll do a little review, not full scale review, and see what the impact is. But often it can be, well, what has blocked that? Is it that it needs cleansing more often? Often it's not. Often there's a specific incident, and so it wouldn't matter if you do it every 1 year, every 2 years, every 10 years. If that specific incident occurs, you'd still stop you in between. But no, it doesn't restart. It'll still be from the last time. Those are just our reactive maintenance teams.
Yeah, also we got hotspot areas, which when we get a weather warning, we'll check those areas in Great Dyns. So we check them prior, during, and after the event.
But going back to the collapsed pipes and things, is there a time scale for repairing collapsed pipes?
In terms of collapsed pipes, we're aware of it. We'll repair ASAP, but most of the pipes in Newport are owned by Welsh Water.
Right.
So our gullies drain into the Welsh Water asset. And then we'll liaise with Welsh Water and get the repairs done.
So usually it's an assessment of whose piece of equipment is this. People sort of stay on the road trying to work that out off maps and the like. And some of that is us enforcing and making sure that that's done quite. But if it's carrying and it's needed for drainage, it is usually, my experience, done pretty quickish.
Yeah, because it's mentioned in the document. So I'm just wondering whether that has been actioned. So that is on page 71.
We can pick that up and check that it has.
Sorry?
We can pick that up and check that it has. Yeah, that's
Yeah, right. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Reeks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, touching more on what Councillor Harris was saying there about the gully cleansing, etc. Just around that, can you give us a bit of an idea of what you class as a principal route? What is it, and what is a classified route? I think we can work out what city centre routes are. Just because obviously in your presentation, Joe, you referred to the A48 being flooded around Penhow. Well, that's sort of a main. I would class that as a main route coming from Chepstow into Newport. But looking at this area, then the timescales, it wouldn't be classed as a principal or classified route. So how do you determine what is principal and what is a classified route?
Classified route, principal routes would be your A routes, your B routes. For example, you mentioned the A48 near Penhow. That'd be classed as a classified route. So that would be cleansed twice a year.
Okay, so, yeah, that stacks up. And so what's the principal route then?
Principal route will be your B routes more. In terms of the city centre is defined as a city centre.
Yeah, stands agree to that one.
Yeah, thank you.
So for these sort of brains, how we run the council.
We also pick up on page 93 of the report, and point 19 there you say that NCC endeavoured to undertake investigations into flood incidents within 4 weeks. I presume as a council we tend to get out a lot sooner than that.
I think that's the statutory investigation for section 19 report, is it? Or is that no?
It's just that, yeah, we put that in. It's within 4 weeks, I guess, because normally operations will go out. Andrew knows Martin Bird would normally go out.
Yeah, the question will be quicker than 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I suppose the catch-all is sometimes these events involve different parties, don't it? And so you could be waiting for a meeting with Welsh Water, you could be waiting with separate landowner and things. Because it goes back to the question from Councillor Harris earlier on. Sometimes you may think, oh, it's just a block gully. It's not that. It manifests itself in the block gully, but the issue can be related further upstream, and then that's blocking the gully. So sometimes it takes a little while to get the root cause. But my experience of most of those local level stuff is they're done within 48 hours or so. To be honest, they're done pretty quickish.
I was going to say something like the A48 being blocked. Yeah, we don't leave that 4 weeks.
I read that as the sort of, that was the outcome of the investigation as opposed to the remedial works which would have taken place immediately. You would have then concluded an investigation, and I read it as you then provide the other authorities with your written conclusions and any long-term remedial action that might be required.
Yeah, the operational team don't wait for the investigation to happen. They
I didn't think that was the case.
So they're there to go out whenever.
That's just what I was going to come back with. It's the investigation of the flood rather than the actual flood itself being corrected. So that could take some time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Somebody else was coming in before. I think Councillor Thomas, you asked to come in, didn't you? Back in.
Sorry, Chair. I thought Councillor Reynolds has got his hand up.
Sorry, I didn't see that again yet. Councillor Reynolds.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Thomas. It's on the back of Councillor Linton's comments actually about he specified the RSLs, but more generally with the riparian landowners, in section 4.4 it mentions that there's regular liaison with riparian landowners to ensure their responsibilities being fulfilled. I was just wondering, what form does that liaison take? How does it actually look? How often is it done? And probably more importantly, what enforcement actions are available to us as a council if you've got either an irresponsible landowner that really doesn't care, or maybe just people who aren't even aware of what their responsibilities are? I know you mentioned about you could react to reports? You know, if it was an RSL, for example, then if they get reported, you would do something about it. But is there something more proactive that's done and something on a regular basis? And as I say, then what's our options if things aren't going as well as they should be?
Yeah, during our schedule works, if we do identify anything that's not our responsibility, we will inform the landowner. And we'll write to the landowner, or we'll meet them on site and explain the reasons why.
Right, so you actually go out to these properties and you do investigations yourself and then contact the landowners?
I think it tends to be, your questions around sort of more proactive, isn't it? I think it tends to be, you know, it's it's a small team. I mean, it's basically Daniel. So in turn that we do mainly tend to be dealing with problems, but you know, it is a fair point. Maybe we need to be looking more about proactive engagement and making people aware of their responsibilities in the first case. But yeah, I suppose we're limited in what resources we can deploy, so it does tend to be dealing with, oh, there's an issue there or something there, and then that's where that engagement tends to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate there's only so many hours in a day, isn't there? And obviously you've got limited numbers of people in your team. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Which can be difficult because the problem is not on our land, so sometimes you can't see it.
Yeah, well, that sort of leads me on to the second part of my question, really, is then what options are available to you if people aren't taking the action they need to be taken?
Right, John, I was just going to come in on that one. And if I was going to say was, if you do have water courses running through your property, then the maintenance of that would be a constraint of your insurance anyway. And if it wasn't, it would become void, really, because, you know, like I said, once you purchase that house, or the owner of that house, you would know that water course is running through there. So, and obviously, if you're allowing that to get blocked up and if flooded, you wouldn't be covered from an insurance point of view.
On enforcement.
Yeah, the council as well has got enforcement powers. So if a riparian landowner didn't undertake their responsibilities, firstly we go to legal and they send out a letter. If then the landowner doesn't respond, we can act, I guess, go onto the land and do whatever work needs to be carried out. But then we'd have to possibly put a charge on the property and get the money back for dealing with the issue. But we do have the power to do that. Yeah.
We do find the best approach is to meet the landowner on site and discuss it with them.
That's the last resort.
There's not very often we go down the legal route.
Yeah, the enforcement is the last resort, but you know, the strict answer to your question, the powers are there. It's the sort of powers the council are reluctant to use because it's a challenge environment, but they can do as a sort of backstop of last resort. But as Andrew says, usually engagement first. People understand the issues.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I understand your Laura's point about the insurance being invalidated, but obviously I was thinking more of the case of problems affecting other properties, not just that landowner's property. But yeah, you've answered that. Thanks.
Councillor Thomas, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a declare an interest one, Stow Hill. Stow Hill's mentioned specifically as one of the areas where you would inspect the everything once a year. What was the phrasing on it? Oh, thank you. Yeah, gully cleansing. Has that? How long has that been on the list for you know, as a specific Stow Hill area?
In terms of Stow Hill, it's always been cleansed once a year.
Right, has it? Okay, all right.
For the MTRP.
Right. I mean, there's a variety of issues there. We've got issues on the Baineswell side, which is the side nearest to the town centre, because, you know, Baineswell, it's in the name, isn't it? There have been springs underneath which cause problems periodically. The one which actually, it's some time ago, it was erased originally, but it did take quite a bit of nagging of Welsh Water to get anything to do about, because they had springs spontaneously causing water to flow down through Chapel Park, which, you know, is one thing, and it's their resource, which they're losing a resource, aren't they, by water literally going down the drain. But it was also freezing in winter, so, you know, we were quite concerned about people falling, the slip hazards, and also, you know, tearing the park to bits. You know, we ended up with deterioration of the grass in there and things like this. But you know, those side roads in Stow Hill as well, they're Victorian and they've got like a sort of almost like a water course. They've got the housing and then a pavement, and then some of them have got a sort of a cobbled area, which the water should be flowing down freely, you know, and presumably that was probably put there to deal with the spring situation as well. But because, you know, this is, I suppose this is partners again, isn't it? You get grass and weeds growing there because of the abundance of water. And then that just adds to the blockages then and further backlog. So I just wanted to, you know, ask you about those sorts of things. So you're doing a clearance of those sorts of areas on an annual basis?
Yeah, we clear Stow Hill every year, but also in terms of the grass growing, we work with cleansing.
Right.
The cleansing, I'm not sure the frequency of cleansing that area.
It needs a something, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And of course, recently we've just acquired Monbank. Monbank is the lowest lying bit of Stow Hill. And of course, it's got considerable water works that have gone on, particularly at the far end down on the Maze Glass end. And the part which is or is at the side of, adjacent to the new development of Mendelgeef Road. Now the water management schemes down there seem to be, you know, down there for the lower level, but they, you know, there's obviously an awareness on the estate of those things taking place. So you would go and review those, or would they come under the responsibility of Welsh Water or some other body?
In terms of new developments, Monbank's not adopted yet.
No, that's right. Yes.
Wouldn't get involved in that till it's adopted.
Right.
In terms of Mendelgeef Road, I can have a look at the issues there.
Right.
It's not adopted. It won't be adopted.
Yeah.
Well, the estate is, don't suppose for a minute the new estate is being adopted until.
No, it's not.
No.
And
But if you're talking about in terms of what happens when that comes to council responsibility, then there's those checks are already all put in place at that adoption stage, aren't they? So the council doesn't take on anything that isn't built-in requirements of its planning requirements.
so just to clarify that, you neither adopt it, until it's adopted, you won't inspect it either?
We'll inspect it as it's being developed. But in terms of reactive maintenance or maintenance, we won't do anything until it's adopted.
Right. What happens if it's substandard?
And then we won't adopt it. It'll be up for the developer to rectify those
And
issues.
and who can put pressure on the developer then?
It'll be our highway asset team.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
In terms of them, if it's not built to standard, yeah, the restraint that the council has is on not adopting it, so that they carry on bearing the costs of it. The residents there'll probably be a bond on the estate.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very clearly, Paul.
I said there'll probably be a bond on there as well, which there's a backstop if it's not done properly. But usually on those sort of assets, they'll be inspected by the council as they're being built, and so they will be close to being in a suitable position once adopted, and there'll be some changes needed if they're not built correctly, and the council will tell them what changes need to be made.
Do you know, your words there, Paul, give me considerable hope.
I mean, don't forget though that the developer never has to offer it over to the council for adoption.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
The developer doesn't have to offer it to the council for adoption. If they want to maintain it themselves, they can. They don't have to pass it over to the council. And the challenge comes then when they don't want to offer it for adoption and don't want to maintain it.
I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on that in this place.
Councillor Harris, you were next, and then Councillor Cleverly.
Yes. After the Rudarian flood, was a report written about it?
Yeah, we will have a report for it. Yeah, maybe a simple report of what the issues were and what was done to rectify it.
Yeah. Can I have sight of that?
Yeah.
You should take those requests through member services rather than be asking at this meeting, John. Should know better than that.
As Claire said, if you email that to members, that request to member services, and they'll feed back.
Councillor Cleverly.
Thank you, Chair. This is going on from what Councillor Thomas said about the underwater springs, because I know in Bettis we've got a lot of underwater springs, especially as you come down Bettis Lane. on the left-hand side opposite the cricket club. And every time it rains, it floods. And also, like Councillor Thomas said in Bainesville, in the old YMCA by St. Paul's Church, in the cellar there is an underwater spring, and they had to divert it because apparently the cellar kept flooding. And I know that because I worked at the YMCA years ago and the manager was saying about it. So there's lots of things like that in Newport that you're probably not aware of.
The one issue with springs, they can pop up anyway.
That's
And what we've always
correct.
found, yeah, when you deal with them, you just tend to move the problem sometimes. But I think it's two issues we're talking about. Yeah, I think you're talking about Welsh water leaks and natural springs.
Yes.
So obviously Welsh water leaks will be Welsh water. The natural springs we'll review as and when required.
We could try bottling the water for the natural springs. You think and
Okay, thank you all.
budget saving for next year.
What happens when you spring a leak? Any other questions from members waiting to come in? Councillor Reeks?
This one is related with flood management. In terms of actually flood managing then, how can you put in place processes to divert water from where it's collecting down into sort of canals and rivers, etc.?
You're talking about flood events at the time, you?
Or flood events, or where you have plains, and let's look at the golf course near us, for example, and diverting the water down to that into the canal where it was not a lot of water in there previously.
Oh, just don't. Basically, when we've got flood problems, we'll only divert and keep it within our asset. We wouldn't divert onto a local golf course.
Or from the golf course,
Or from the golf
somewhere
course.
like that, down into a local water source such as a canal or river.
You've got to look to see if it's an historic problem. If they've always done it, it's very difficult for them to divert elsewhere.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
I think in terms of some movement from different, sometimes you'll need an extraction license, or that'll need to be regulated in some degree if you're moving it from one asset to the other. But yeah, something we'd have perhaps a takeaway and have a look at.
Councillor Thomas?
Just on that point, because this is sort of another one of these about the strategic direction, isn't it? You know, we are aware that with climate change, you know, there will be areas which suffer. So how are we, you know, are we thinking about the bigger picture, perhaps? You know, the sort of example that Councillor Reek just mentioned, you know, to help people address other problems which will arise from the variabilities in the climate at the moment.
You mean dry weather and into water? Is that what you're talking about? Is this where you're going? I think at the moment, you know, obviously from a budget point of view, we unfortunately we have to be quite reactive in what we're doing. And as much as it would be brilliant to step out there and put all these, like I said, diversions. I understand what you're talking about, Councillor Reeks, and, you know, put gullies and diversions in, but as it is at the moment, we're not, you know, we don't have that available fundage to go and, you know, put drains through the city and everything, really.
Is there a mechanism to put bright ideas to Welsh Government to ask them for some extra funding?
There is, and we get these some of the grants that Joe said are around that on a small scale, although I think as Cabinet member says, we've got to sort of be realistic on what we can achieve. Actually, although it doesn't feel like it, Newport where there's been significant flooding in Wales over the last few years, and partly goes back to that other question, I think, Councillor.
Because of all the building we're doing, Paul.
No, what I was going to say is actually we've been relatively lucky. We've had very few significant flood impacts on households, which is the primary cause.
Yeah,
so in terms of funding,
absolutely.
it's around protecting households and then businesses. And so relative to other authorities around us, we've been lucky, partly because we've been able to be reactive, partly work in relationships with others. So yes, on a small scale, but I think we've got to be realistic about what we're going to achieve.
Yeah, just looking at the funding sources here, though, it's mainly about maintaining the sort of statutory obligation, isn't it, to do various functions. It isn't really about that long-term alleviation or improvement of the situation?
I mean, Stevenson Street is an alleviation scheme, and obviously we're very reactive. In fact, with the Cillian flooding, when we have high coastal tides, and the river tides come in, there's an alert that goes out and the flood defences go up, so we have got things in place where we know it's continuous. We don't just go there and then it is flooded, like I said, we've got those procedures in place that will stop Cillian, from flooding, where we put the defences up. The ward members are made aware maybe 24 hours before the high tide, so our civil contingencies team continuously monitor the tide. We get, it's not just as it floods, it's before it floods. And so, we've got a good team that are actually monitoring the river, the coast, continuously. So, I'm happy with what they're achieving.
So I'm not familiar with Stevenson Street at all, but I'll have to go down there, won't I, and have a look. Or perhaps, it might be an idea if people could be offered a little tour around
at the moment, isn't it? It's in the process at the moment. It's in the process.
Currently in construction, but we can ask, arrange with NRW if the committee want to have a look. I don't know what ward members have seen it recently anyway, but
would be interested. Yes,
I've been there, and I can share the contact for the community development officer for Griffiths who are doing the work. If you want it, I'm sure he'd be glad to show you around.
I suppose in terms of the other large asset that's complete that people want to in Shaftesbury, it's quite hidden actually, the work that's done in Shaftesbury. That was the previous really large project that we undertook. So there's a lot of sheet piling and reinforcement and raising of roads in the Shaftesbury area, because that was, our probably biggest hotspot.
Any other questions from any committee members?
Yes, Chair, can I ask my question now?
Of course you can, Councillor Pym, yep.
Thank you. It's probably to Paul, this is. It's regarding the River Usk and the flood defence barrier. Is there a reason why it's not mentioned in this report? Or is there a reason why it's not part of the long-term strategy to stop flooding in Newport? The River Usk poses the biggest significant risk to Newport councillors, and it doesn't seem to me that we are talking about it.
Yeah, it was also sorry, Councillor, just in terms of that will come under coastal management. So the coastal management doesn't come at this level.
Okay.
So this NRW will lead on the coastal stuff. Obviously, we've got very high tidal range that comes up to the River Usk and the like, but that will be led on that level. This is more around, and it goes back to Councillor Thomas's point. It's kind of a bit operational for a strategic document, but this is around the sort of lower level interventions that the council controls over the next 5 years.
Should it be our responsibility to lobby though? The coastal.
I'll come back on that if I'm okay. With regards to the flood management strategy, it's actually tangible information and tangible detail of what we have to do to manage the flood risk alleviation within the city. Obviously, barrage building, it's a great thing. It would cost billions, and yeah, we are, separately we lobby, but it's not down to the local authority officers to lobby for that. We can make recommendation, or they can make recommendation, but it's a big political ask. This one, this isn't, can we build a barrage? This is going to national government, asking them for a couple of probably billions. Putting that in, there's a lot of stakeholders in there then as well. Welsh government, national resources Wales, this is not for our flood management strategy, unfortunately. And as Paul said, that's natural resources and everything else, but we'd all have a barrage, I'm sure. But
would you disagree then? Would you disagree then, Laura, that a barrage would be a silver bullet for the flood risks in Newport?
For the river, of course, but we'd still have a number of flooding incidents across the city that are not relating to the river, which is the water courses, which is to do with the culverts and to do with other things. So a silver bullet but no, not really. It's not a silver bullet.
From a purely technical point, I don't want to get the pros cons of a barrage, but it alleviates a lot of problems, but it also causes stuff. So I don't really understand all that, but someone who's cleverer than me perhaps can explain all that. But yeah, so but if we were purely looking at this a flood thing, that would be classed as coastal support to the NRW. But I get the point you're making. It's a wider issue, and it's an economic argument. So that would come from other sources rather than primarily through the local flood risk.
Yeah, I think it's not an issue for this committee to deal with today, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
From where we've come to today, the flood management risk is about the localised flood risk. The River Usk itself is NRW responsibility. I do accept there's probably as Councillor Lacey does, there's a local authority role in terms of the bigger picture and the part to play, but it's probably not relevant to this strategy today, I think it's fair to say. So in any event, most of the flooding that happens around Newport isn't from the river. It's from failed drainage, essentially, you know, so yeah. And Councillor Reynolds, we've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back to the issue of funding, if I can, just for a quick for a moment. I mean, it was mentioned earlier on about some of the sort of smaller scale grants around about the sort of £200,000 mark. I don't know whether this is actually stated in the report or not. I tried to find it, but maybe I missed it. But is this funding, is it more or less sort of automatic every year that the council would get this funding, or does it need to be applied for every year? If it is an annual application, or an as and when needed application, how successful has the council been in securing that money when it needs it? And how effective has it been? And a sort of link to that then, if I just wanted to go on to some of the flood risk management that's been done. It was mentioned earlier on about the flood barriers in Crinder. I suppose I should declare a quick interest here as well, because I am a member of the Shaftesbury ward. I'm a resident of the Shaftesbury ward, and I'm on the planning committee. But it was just an example, really. There's been 14 million spent on those Crinder flood defences, which seem, as far as I know, they're doing a really good job. And yet, when applications come to the planning committee, quite often that's an objection that's raised on a regular basis, is the flood risk. So I just see a little bit of a conflict there that I don't fully understand. So I just hoping really for a little bit more information, if you like, on how effective these flood defences are being. And as I say, going back to the grants, how successful have we been in applying for those?
Do you want to cover off the grant bit first, Joe, and then I'll...
We apply annually for the grant funding to Welsh Government. That's the flood revenue grant, the small scale scheme grant that you mentioned, and the bigger schemes that would be covered by the flood and coastal erosion risk management grant. So we have to bid, obviously, for all the funding under those grants. It's not a given. I can send a list of schemes and funding that's been allocated over the previous financial years. At the moment, we're still waiting to find out what's going to be granted for 2023-24, because submissions have gone in to Welsh Government, but they're currently being considered.
So John, we have a list of projects that we wish to undertake, and those grants then those applications go in. So we don't just apply for sort of 25,000 under the small scheme. We would have that list of schemes that we're looking to undertake already, and then they would go for grant application.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. In some way, you know, each year we don't know, because it depends how much money globally that Welsh Government allocate towards this, and then how they can pick the schemes. And so it does vary year to year. Just on the planning regime, you know, it's difficult to know without the specifics. Obviously, as you mentioned, the flood alleviation scheme has had a really good impact, and it protects it to a certain degree. But the constraints of that may well be no further building, no further taking up of soak away of permeable grounds. So you know, if you've raised it to a level that area is safe, you then don't want to make it worse again. But also some of the other objections of flooding could be just around the specifics themselves of the development, and whether it's doing enough to mitigate its impact that it has on it, because you don't want it dumping water onto neighbouring estates. So it just because you've got some flood defences, and that doesn't mean, right, fill your boots, guys, build on what you want. It can be quite a complex issue, but I get what you're saying. It can seem a bit contradictory. It's like, haven't we sorted this out? Oh no, we haven't quite. So.
Yeah, I mean, I understand obviously this isn't the forum to discuss planning applications, but just sort of on a general level, I just found it a little bit difficult to understand sometimes how certain applications get passed and other ones are refused in roughly the same area when these defences have been built, and the arguments regarding flooding seem to apply in one instance and not the other. So it's a bit tricky sometimes, but I understand what you're saying. There are different circumstances, and maybe the very act of building on land could take away some of these soakaway areas and cause the problems. So yeah, I do understand that.
Just on that point, Councillor Reynolds, the flood defence work doesn't necessarily protect the infrastructure around it for the length of time that a development would be considered to be in terms of planning terms. So when I went down to the Stevenson Street development, that programme just protects the area for the next 50 years. It only takes account of 50 years of climate change, when the life cycle as development, as you know from planning terms, is 75 or 80, I think, from memory, which means that over the life cycle of a development, they'd look at a 1 in 100 and a 1 in 200 year event, and it would flood during that time. So even though the defences are there, they're only designed to last a shorter period of time than the life cycle of the development. So that's where you get a conflict between the flood defences now and the life cycle of development. So they're looking at the whole life of it, which often goes 100, 200 years. So
yeah, of course, yeah. Can I just very quickly go back to the funding? Because it's been established that it's not a given. I'm just thinking of forward planning and looking to the future. We all know the climate changes are probably going to get worse, almost certainly going to get worse. So if these sort of smaller scale £200,000 roughly grants aren't given to us, how big an effect does that have on our future planning, our forward planning?
I was going to say that would have a big impact on what we do, definitely.
It's a significant assistance. It seems like they call small scale grants, they're small, but some minor tweaks and the level that we're working at actually, is a useful benefit. And if we can look back over the schemes over the last 5 or 6 years, they have alleviated and stopped things from what is actually, in terms of government, quite small level expenditure.
And it was highlighted as a risk in your report, wasn't it? The risks to the strategy failing are, the funding being pulled or reduced. So
yeah, absolutely, and that's why I was asking how successful we've been with. I know you won't want to go into individual applications, obviously, but just on a general level, how successful have we been? Have we got a good record of securing this funding, or is it very much hit and miss?
Yeah.
I think we do well on the whole, but I'd just like to say the Welsh Government, obviously their budgets are getting smaller, and we're having to obviously vie with other authorities on our applications. So it does depend on, I guess, we know how they assess the schemes overall, but if something else takes priority in another authority, then it may mean that we lose out on the grant funding, or we get less of that funding.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
That's okay. Councillor Dan.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a generic question, really. It's in relations to the permissive powers. I mean, what's our role as the local lead flood authority in terms of, mitigating risks in relations to, floods in our local area? Obviously, I know Councillor Pym earlier on mentioned about the barrage. So I was just wondering what our role is in terms of the coastal erosion, mitigating flood risks, and also designating specific structures to protect the public. I was just wondering if you could give me a bit more information on that, please.
Obviously, as the lead local flood authority, we liaise with the risk management authorities, and we've got responsibilities if, for example, a riparian landowner wasn't fulfilling their responsibilities with regards to watercourses and causing flooding, then obviously we've got the power to step in. We also have what we call ordinary watercourse consent, where if anybody wants to work on a watercourse and put a structure into it, or in any way affect the flow on that watercourse, then they have to come to us for consent to do their work, and that mitigates obviously flood risk. Yeah, coastal erosion, obviously we would liaise with Natural Resources Wales, as that's their remit, but we also, or Daniel, my colleague, attends the Severn Estuary there's a 7 estuary coastal group that we're involved with. So yeah, and Daniel's goes to those meetings. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other members got any other questions, or can I have a go? Okay, a couple of questions or sort of comments, if you like, from me. The funding section of the report makes lots of reference to the available sort of capital funding and small works. What it doesn't, I don't think, unless I've missed it, what it doesn't say is what we spend each year just maintaining what we've got. There's nothing about reactive maintenance in here. I think that would be useful to sort of explain to the public what that is.
That 500 and something.
Highways operation.
So the bit that's called drainage operations, but perhaps it could be that spelled out. So that will include the regular cyclical maintenance, the gully stuff, and then the reactive stuff as well. But yeah, so it is in there, but perhaps it needs to be.
Yeah, I did say I could have missed it. So
yeah, but I think that's a point. It probably needs to be brought out of it.
When you go out to members of the public, it's useful to tell them actually what we're just spending just to look after things, so that they kind of understand the level of investment that we're putting in. You know, people often say to us, "Well, what are you spending the council tax on?" Well, one of those, you know, because we always say, "Well, we spend loads on education and social services." They're the big ticket items, but you know. It's good to highlight and pull out sort of what we're spending each year just to look after and make sure what we've got isn't flooding your home. So I think that's a useful one. I think we ought to pull out as part of the consultation. My question around that then is, to what extent is the sort of the authority sort of budget positions to your ability to look after things? So we've had sort of in the past cuts to certain budgets in terms of areas, and one, you know, I've been speaking to Andrew about some of the riparian stuff last year. Do we understand, say we're spending that 558,000, do we think that ought to be £1 million, for example, but we just haven't got it? Or have we got a figure on what we would like? I know it's easy to say, you know, yes, we'd like this amount of money. Do we know what the budget shortfall is and where that might be having an impact?
I think we always want more money to do more things. I think it's striking a balance, isn't it? In terms of the maintenance regime, sort of go back to that sort of gully example, is actually we're reasonably comfortable that the cyclical maintenance and the revised cyclical maintenance is working well. That doesn't mean a gully won't block, but you know, increasing the cleanse from once a year to twice a year or whatever doesn't necessarily solve that, because a large number of our incidents are things like, okay, the leaves come down, or something, or someone has put some cement into the drill, or things like that, and so you can't really capture in that way. As I'd say, you know, in terms of serious large scale flooding on the events that we can have an impact on, and you know, touch wood here, because it's a risk all the time, isn't it? Compared to authorities around us, we've done pretty well. It never feels like that when you're in the storm bit. Yeah, but you know, you can look over the last few years when we've had large storm events or put pressure on the infrastructure, and we've been able to deal with it comparably well. You know, you can never have. I mean, you'd need hundreds of resources to outrule and make everything perfect. But I think we're striking the right balance at the moment.
Thanks. I was going to pick up the unadopted highways one, but that's already been done, so that's it from me. Any other members got any other questions? Nope, all good. So we will pick up some recommendations really now, if the committee has got any, and we'd ask you to stay for that. If you can, so we can formulate the recommendations. Councillor Lacey, I'm not sure you need to stay, but the directive I've had is to ask officers to stay, so entirely up to you. So, perfect, thanks. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, really, it's just sort of looking at our recommendations and where we've sort of come up. Neil, do you want to kind of pick up some notes? I've got a few as we've gone that we might come out in terms of recommendations, and then we can sort of try and formulate them into some words to sort of go back.
Okay, Chair. Some of the notes that I've taken down is there's comments made about further methods of public consultation. So, was there any particular ways of public consultation that you would like in addition to what is currently being done at the moment, such as social media?
Oh, sorry,
No, it's all right, go on.
In the consultation, it mentioned on the website and in libraries. Well, we need to consider that some of the libraries might be closing pretty soon due to cuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, any consultation that would happen would be during the opening hours, I'm sure. But yeah, it's certainly something to be aware of in terms of accessibility. Did you want to come in on a point, Councillor Thomas, on the same point?
Yeah, it was about actually there's a summary. So, you know, so people don't feel daunted by the amount of information which they have to get through to be able to form an overall view.
Yeah.
You know, to crystallise the points that they want to make.
Yeah, one of the points.
I mean, we're used to ploughing through quite long documents, aren't we, on this committee? But this one.
It wasn't dry at all.
It wasn't dry.
In regards to consultation as well, I know previous consultations gone out. I think the RLDP went out on one where they should join with the South Wales Argus, and they promoted it as well. So that seems like a good vehicle to reach a wider audience as well.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of points I noted down as well. You may come to it, Neil. Sorry, is just for elected members to let those local flood groups in their area know of the consultation, and maybe let you know directly of any groups and contact details, so we can certainly sort of feed that back. You mentioned in your presentation, Joanna, there was a questionnaire which would have been sent, which we'll send out. I think would have been useful to have seen that and had comments on the questions, but some sort of format perhaps in the papers for future ones as well, so we can have a look at the questions and see if we think they're sort of right in terms of the context, so we can give some feedback on that afterwards as well, potentially.
Send that across.
Yeah. If anybody then wants to comment on the questions and whether there's sort of anything additional that you would tease out when you sort of answer it, because we've gone through this in detail, you know, quite a detailed report, we ought to know the types of questions that would hit the salient points in terms of the responses you want, and that's why I was thinking that'd be useful, really. Sorry if I cut across with it.
No, that's fine, Chair. Councillor Thomas just mentioned again about making a version of the report which is a bit more appealing for residents to underview during the consultation, but that was just brought up a moment ago. You mentioned something, Chair, about it would be good to highlight what we spend each year on the drainage operations. Was there anything further that the committee would like to raise as a recommendation in regards to the report itself?
As I said earlier, you know, thinking about being proactive, thinking about, you know, further forward, you know, we have the Future Generations Act in Wales, you know, how can we be innovative? How can we contribute to that innovative across the city, particularly in view of us having the largest growth of any area of Wales?
Yeah. Yeah, so just sort of thinking what that looks like in terms of a worded recommendation. So, but go on, Councillor Rees, come in on.
Not on that point, just on a separate point again, just coming back to the public consultation in the report, it's very helpful. You made reference to a glossary of terms at the back and a big expansion, but perhaps for the public consultation, maybe a glossary of the acronyms that is used, because there's an awful lot of acronyms right throughout the report. So maybe just as a helpful addendum for public consultation.
Go on, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Chair. In the strategy monitoring, it says it will annually monitor the strategy and will review the strategy every 6 years. Is that too many? 6 years? I don't know, it's just a question.
Is that because 6 years lands when the go on, sorry.
Sorry, that's probably a typo actually, sorry. We've noticed a couple since then. I was going to say we annually review, there's an action plan in the actual strategy that we will annually review, and that will be based on the grant funding available and what work we're doing. And obviously at the end of each financial year, we can then issue a summary on what works are being carried out as well.
But I think the 6 year, which should be 5 year cycle, is a set statutory. That'll follow on from national strategies being reviewed as well.
Okay,
It won't
thank
be
you.
that- It won't be that it's just left 5 years,
Yeah.
but the rewrite.
Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. Just going back to Councillor Thomas's point, I wonder whether the recommendation is just around, how does the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act fit into the plan? Perhaps maybe the recommendations consideration be given to that, and it might be that that's already in play. But
yeah, I was just going to say at every policy that comes before us, that whoever writes the report has to justify where the Future Generations Act comes in.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're used to seeing that. That's not actually the question I'm asking. I wonder how can we contribute to the spirit of that, not just comply with it, but actually, how can we develop, long-term thinking? How can we, nurture that culture amongst officers and partners and stakeholders in this? So maybe we'll have a separate question at the end. Blue sky thinking.
Well, it might be something that's picked up as part of the consultation. Actually, what more?
Yeah,
that could be a part in sort of question, couldn't it? What more do you think the authority could be doing by itself and with partners to?
well, maybe not blue sky thinking. Maybe it's grey sky thinking. Yeah.
We did talk about sharing information on the Councillor Reynolds picked up on the success, didn't he, of the grant applications, and we talked about sharing the data on. I'm not sure it's up to you. I'm not sure the recommendation is to share each individual scheme and how it's funded, but the level of grant each year that we bring in for schemes would be useful. And again, as part of that data going out, I think, if we're getting, over the last 3 years, we've brought 560,000 this year, 400 last year, the year before on capital projects and schemes or whatever. Might be to sort of tease that out as part of the headline to let people know, similar to the revenue point I made earlier about how much we're spending on stuff. It's just, they're good headlines at the end of the day, aren't they? So why not shout about them?
Chair, if you don't mind me, just seeing as you've just mentioned me, I'll just back you up on that. It was never my intention to ask for individual applications and individual results and the whole massive list of. It was the overall picture I was trying to get at, and yes, some sort of indication of that would be really useful, I think.
Yeah, I just think, whenever you're doing consultation, you should be sharing all the good things you've done as well as kind of the kind of nitty-gritty in the detail in it. So yeah. Anything else, Neil?
That's everything I got here.
Anybody else got anything else they would like to include now or think we've missed?
I'm fine, Chair, thanks.
Perfect. Right, we can close that agenda item then for the flood management strategy. So thank you everybody for your attendance and input, and thanks Joanne for your presentation and all the detail as well, and for fielding most of the questions. I know it's not that great, and it gets colder in here the longer the day goes on, doesn't it? I was all right when I first came in.
I was just thinking.
So committee, we just got a few procedural points on the minutes really then. So the minutes of the last meeting and the scrutiny advisor report. That's okay.
We get on the way. We appear to be going on. Personally,
Okay, so just coming back to the agenda then, I also didn't do apologies, but there were no apologies. So everybody was here either online or in person at the start. So, so that's why I skipped over that. So minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of January, which was the budget consultation. So they were on pages 3 to 16, I think, of the papers. Any comments, questions, or are we happy to ratify them as a true record of the meeting? Did you have a query on the minutes of the last meeting?
I'm happy to propose we accept them.
I think Councillor Cleverly might have a point a second. No, that's okay. That's fine. While you're doing that, I did just want to pick up one sort of point from the meeting, which was around the bus charges, which was the infrastructure and the bus station departure charges, where we sort of made a recommendation to publish that as a subsidy on buses rather than a which is fine, and that's captured in the report. But we did talk about, actually, we wanted to sort of unpick that bit of work as part of our future work programme. And I didn't see that bit in the minutes to say that we did want to sort of look at it in future. So I don't know if we just need to add that in. And then we can pick it up as part of the forward work programme. That was the only bit I had on them. I mean,
Can I just ask them why what happened to the highways asset management plan? Because that was part of the forward work programme for today, but that then
yeah,
didn't go
so
on the agenda for
I'm told the highways asset management plan was delayed. So you did email round, didn't you, Neil? Did that just come to me or everybody? I thought it did, yeah. So Neil did email everybody and say that it's been delayed and wouldn't be considered today. So it'll stay on the forward work programme for when it's due, and I presume it's due. I mean, we've also still got outstanding the homeless transition plan, which again is on the forward work programme, because that should have come in sometime between October and January, I think, and we still haven't had that. So they're both still on the forward work programme to sort of to look at when they're ready, really. I mean, I don't know what our role is in terms of, you know, asking for that to be sort of, you know, expedited or hurried up or whatever. I mean, you know, I know with the, or I'm told with the homelessness transition plan that they're waiting for Welsh Government to respond to what's been put in before it can come here. So I guess that's probably out of officers' hands, really, if it's elsewhere. The highways asset management plan, I don't know what the delay is on that.
As soon as we get notification from Stephen Jarrett and the officers, we'll let the committee know as soon as possible. If there is something that we can arrange an additional meeting before May, then we will. But as soon as we know, we'll let the committee know.
Did you find the point now, Jan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I turned it all off. Had to go back and find it. Right, on the minutes of the last meeting, the query is on the landfill site closure. Right, the director clarified the closure of the landfill site would only affect the disposal of waste into the landfill, but at the end of it, she mentioned considering alternative waste disposal methods such as incineration. Wouldn't that cause add to the pollution problem and the climate change with the smoke and fumes?
I'm not.
And also with lorries going in and out.
Yeah. I'm not an expert, so I couldn't answer your question, but
no,
I'm sure Neil can follow it up and ask the question.
And it was only reading over the minutes today or at the weekend.
So they've got the incinerator down at Cardiff Docks, haven't they? Which I've forgotten the name of. Viridor, isn't it? I think run it, don't they?
It's a valid point about the, as it were, air miles. You know, the additional.
We did raise it as part of the committee in terms of the sort of travel costs at the time, and we did sort of say about it. But yeah, I mean, we can follow it up with another question, really, and ask for a bit more on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just info would be nice.
Yeah. You happy to follow that up, Neil? Yeah. Any other points on the minutes, or are we happy to accept them as a true record? Save for the couple of things. Yeah.
Just a question: did it ever come up? Who? I prefer it when I'm chairing because I can leave it on all the time then. Did we ask the question? Who decides on when your landfill is full? Because I mean, you could just go on adding to it, couldn't you? Who actually decides when
Is
it's
it
full?
Resort Wales or that would be a question as well.
Yeah, we could certainly ask the question. I
Please.
suspect there are some guidelines under the for Environmental Protection Act. Yeah, we can certainly ask the question and get the answer.
And something which I'm not saying necessarily, but I mean, we're told by officers that we're still in a situation where people are disposing of their food waste in their general bin up to the amount of 1/3 of their general bin is full of food. Now, actually, if that were going to landfill, that would actually rot down, wouldn't it? So that would presumably create a gap over the course of just a few months, really. It would rot down. So, this is tied to the other question. Who decides when it's full?
Yeah, we can ask the two questions, really. Who decides when it's full, and how are the levels monitored in terms of dropping those things that sort of naturally biodegradable? That's the right word. Yeah, we can certainly ask the question. I know that they have to have monitoring stations and everything throughout it, and they have to release the gases and everything from it. I know there are a load of things that they have to do. So part of that report last time was, whilst the tip will close, there'll be an ongoing cost, if you remember, to looking after it for however many years. So even though we no longer be able to put anything in it, the budget pressure was that at the moment we charge companies to dump their waste there, and so we get an income from it which pays for maintaining it. The budget pressure was we'll no longer be able to charge anybody because it'll be full, but we've still got our ongoing duties to maintain it. So I know that there is an element of it, and that's what the budget pressure was, but we can certainly ask a question. That's right. And then we've got, if we're happy with the minutes, which I didn't hear any other objections, then presumably we've got your report. No, Neil, have we?
Yeah, Chair, just the action sheet, everything, we're up to date with everything. We're just waiting for 2 actions from the Finance Department. The one in the December meeting for the mid-year reviews, and the committee asked to receive data on the number of individuals accessing online services, and the other one, the query which was made in the budget meeting in January. The committee would like to receive information about the appeals process for the fraud prevention initiative once available. So we'll chase that with finance, and as soon as we get that information, we can forward it to the committee.
Yeah, I suspect their pressures are around budget, but I think once that's sort of sorted in the next sort of 10 days or so, particularly for the December question, we ought to be sort of an answer really, sort of 3 months down. That's okay. All right. Have we got the forward work programme on the agenda here today, or?
No, we're all up to date with the current forward work programme, Chair, so we can chase up the Highways Asset Management Plan to see if it would be able to come to the committee before May. If we can, then we can see if we can arrange another meeting, but I'll keep everyone up to date with that. I'll chase up.
And will you add in the committee wanting to look at the bus charges as a future work item?
Yeah, I've notified the head of service of this, but for a future one. So when we meet up with the heads of service and directors, that those have been made aware that they are looking to potentially add this as a agenda item. So we got that.
Perfect, no problem. Anybody got any other business which we've missed or they want to raise? No. You all looked at me then as if I did something wrong. You're all like...
We're amazed it's so long until the next meeting, because we have been quite, well, I felt quite overwhelmed, when we've had 2 in a fortnight sort of thing, Yeah,
it is strange, isn't it? It just goes on to May now.
Natural. Yeah. Are you slipping, Neil?
Well, no, we did have meetings penciled in for March, definitely, I know, and there might have been one, but I think it's probably because those forward work items haven't come. Because at the start of the year we penciled in an additional 2 meetings. Yeah.
I'm away.
So forward work programme, how are officers? How are members contributing to that now for next year? Will we raise it in the main meeting?
We'll raise in the main meeting.
Right.
Yeah, we add it as an agenda item in our next meeting, and then the committee can decide if there's any other items that you would like to be added onto the forward work programme.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think that's just a note to everybody, really. If there's an area which you think ought to have some scrutiny that comes across our path, particularly, you know, if you've been sort of contributing to budgets and stuff like that in terms of the consultations, etc. If you think there are items which would benefit from scrutiny and coming here, then have a think about that ready for the main meeting too. Okay, meeting closed then. Perfect.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone's input.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
officers.
Thanks
Bye.
all.